GLOBIS.
Now we're going to talk about design thinking. This is the fun part of today's session. And so, first of all, please, a little show of hands. Design thinking. How many of you actually have an idea what that is? Okay, well that's actually pretty good. How many of you have actually in your company or in your work, actually for a project, used design thinking? Okay, wow, okay. Now, what is design thinking? Just very quickly, a very quick rehab, and I'm going to ask you because you invented it. Okay.
On? Wow, I should just, in the future, AI will just sense that I want it on, and then, so, yeah, a funny thing about design thinking is I noticed after a few years that even people who were using it had trouble defining it. And everybody has a different definition. I will tell you mine. I think design thinking is the tool set, or you might say the mindset, used by designers for decades now, designing simple things like products and things, but it's applying those same tools to broader, more challenging issues around the world, including revamping education systems, including looking at the way the government interacts with its citizens, things like that. And so I've told you that it's a tool set, but you're going to ask me, well, what are the tools? And I think there are many, but if you distill it down into its essence, I think there are 3 tools, 3 of the most important elements of design thinking. And the first one is about empathy. It's about understanding human needs even when the humans you're dealing with can't articulate the needs themselves. So start with empathy. The second one's about experimentation. And experiments are fun. The problem with experiments, especially sometimes in Japanese context, is experiments sometimes fail, right? And so this experimentation is about rough experiments. It's about willingness to have those experiments fail, right? But if you tell your boss it's an experiment, then the failure doesn't seem so bad, right? So it's empathy, it's experimentation. The third part is about storytelling. It's about when you've come up with the idea that you really believe in, it's about telling exactly the right story to make your idea come to life so that people will listen, so they'll understand, so they'll tell their friends, so that the story can get adopted widely. But what's really important is not the story, it's the idea that the story contains. So empathy, experimentation, storytelling.
Empathy, experimentation, storytelling. So that's great. How do you actually apply this? And I think we need to ask the one woman on the panel because, women are practical, they get down to things. Talk to us about a concrete example.
Let me share a small example of applying design thinking to change the fundamental change. The example is the project with Panasonic on freshman recruiting process. Like as many people know, Japanese recruiting process is very traditional and it's not working anymore. But because it's huge, it's always hard to change from the beginning. But what we do is instead of annual cycle to recruit the freshmen, we did a real time and not selecting people, but selecting project. So we set up the space for project and provide the free access to the project experiment place. So we, Panasonic and Loftwork released such place. And only in 2 months, we have received more than 200 applications to do the experiment in that place from high school students, university students, or under-certified people. So it's and we expect more than 1,000 of freshman contact point with the company. So instead of company seminars or job exhibitions, there is a new way to develop the relationship with students and a company. And that's how we apply the design process into the recruitment system.
So there's an existing pattern how Japanese companies recruit, right? Be free, be experimental to break that pattern and try something new, and then create a playground where that actually happens. Okay, now we've got a hard-nosed business consultant. He's a great guy. Talk to us a little bit about, you've done a lot of work on design thinking, obviously company specific, but you've also taken it up to social policy as well.
Right. I'd like to briefly explain pro bono project called Next Tokyo One Word. It's a project by a team of 12 experts or innovators, including actually Chiaki and Saito-san. And other people are like architects, artists, athlete, food service entrepreneur, media, etc. The project is really about developing the future city vision for Tokyo in view of 2020 and beyond, which is the more important part. We developed, sharpened, and validated various hypotheses at multiple layers. The top layer is the city concept for the entire Tokyo city. The second layer is a specific concept of town development of individual towns like Shibuya, Akihabara. And in many cases, some member of the team are working with a specific property developer who has a lot of stake in those specific towns. And the third layer is about regulatory reforms. So with strong support from senior political decision makers, many of whom were G1 members, we managed to achieve two important regulatory changes. One was about relaxing working visa for professionals in the creative industries. And the second was abolishing the notorious no dancing law after midnight, as you may know. And those are the ongoing activities over the past 2 years, and we applied various tools from a kind of design thinking toolbox to facilitate that kind of discussion as well as engage various stakeholders.
Tak, what was the genesis of this? Was this some enlightened bureaucrat in Kasumigaseki, graduate of Tokyo University, telling you to do this? Or how did this come about?
Actually, it started from a G1 table discussion 3 years ago.
Right.
And we had the discussion about future for Tokyo in 2020, and we had several excellent members at the table. So we started from the small team of 4 or 5 people and gradually invited talented people like Chiaki and Saito-san.
You see, you don't realize, this is actually for you guys, the hard work is going to start after this summit. When we're at the party, Hori-san is going to put you down and you're going to have to at least match this, right? In terms of actually implementing big change. Quickly, just in terms of, what were the points of resistance? It's often said that, when it comes to rules, regulation, that Japan is very rigid, that there is very little flexibility. Tell us a little bit about some of the problems that you encountered with that project.
Well, frankly, many problems and many challenges, but the biggest challenge is inertia in almost every organization, especially in private sector, actually. For example, for a property developer, which is developing a specific town, they like to make sure that they earn a sufficient economic profit by having a combination of expensive offices, expensive residence, and some commercial and food service floors and innovation centers. That kind of combination is the kind of golden formula for any property developer to make some good money. But if all property developers start doing the same combination everywhere in Tokyo, what we're going to have? So that's the kind of inertia as well as a kind of suboptimal optimization effort by each individual player in the ecosystem.
You know, I don't know about you, when I saw Saito-san's presentation, I mean, obviously it's all very glitzy and we all want to go up and dance, right? But I mean, remember how he said, I love this fragmentation. I mean, all of us in all the discussions today is like, oh my God, there's this fragmentation, you know, and he's just like, no, this is cool. Let's embrace it and let's do something with it. Talk a little bit more about this because, you know, you're like, you know, Herbert von Karajan, you know, you're making all these fragmented things actually, you know, turn into something good.
Right. Well, I think as a designer, well, this is like part of the design thinking from my perspective, or from my point of view, is that it's all about how can we see the city or industry, whatever, from pure eyes, like how it meant to be or how it should be. Like, you know, what the Mizawa-san talking, like the next Tokyo is like doing exactly the same thing. Like how the city should be, right? And then from the designer point of view, we just want to make it realize how cool it is. It's not about industry A investing 20 million or whatever that numbers. I don't know, well, because I'm not really good at the numbers. But it's all about how cool or how, you know, really enjoyable that is. I think we need that point of view to make it better word.
No, and it really is the ambition, right?
Yeah.
To not just create
That's
something
ambition.
new, a new project, but to create a completely new system,
Right.
Now, Tom, IDEO.
Yes.
Now, you are originally, you're not an artist, are you? Show me your socks. Show me, look, he's trying, but you know that he's actually a mechanical engineer. He's actually really boring.
Well, I didn't actually do that engineering thing, but my first job out of college was with an accounting firm. So no offense to any of the accountants in the room, but you don't always want your accountant to be creative. You know, that gets you in trouble in some cultures. So, and I think this is important about the message because my brother was, you know, he was, as a kid, he was an artist the whole time and he'd say, oh yeah, it's, you know, people are born artists. No, but I think I'm living proof that, no, you can adopt this. You know, my latest book is called Creative Confidence. Well, in English, in Japanese, it's Creative Mindsetto. And I think a little bit got lost in translation in that title change. Because, you know, Japan, you may have seen this data. Japan, survey data shows that the world believes Japan is the most creative country in the world. You can look it up. It's the Adobe Systems State of Create survey. And oh, by the way, Tokyo is the most creative city, right? And so you got all the creativity you need, including everyone in this room and everyone who works with you. Maybe if the output of creativity in Japan is not what you'd like it to be, it's not about creativity at all. It's about the confidence, right? It's the willingness to build that prototype, to stand up for your idea, to tell your story, right? And so I had to learn that by osmosis. It's not like I was born into that. I learned it, you can learn it, your team can learn it. They have that creativity inside them.
Talk to me, this what you just talked about, prototype. I mean, so you think out of the box, you create something, and this is this prototype. What happens then? What happens then?
Like as you said, you know, what is a hurdle for Japanese company to adapt the design thinking is also connected what exactly Tom said, because Japanese companies have a very long history to make things, make products. So products should be perfect. Once they release the product, you know, they don't want to recall them. So spend long time to release the product. And they have strong fear to experiment. That means that losing more confidence to test. So that is a big challenge for Japanese companies and also society to not to fail, but you know, having experiment is essential process to lead to the success. It's not fail or success, but having continuous experiment will lead to the success. But in Japan, there is kind of culture like fail or success. So before doing experiment, we should be really train and do everything. So That's connected to Saito-san's point and Tom's point,
I think that's such an important point. You know, this shokunin bunka, you want to be perfect. I mean, it's unthinkable for Japan to launch a product and then, oh, sorry, we're actually going to have to do the beta version into a 1.01 version, and have, you know, this. So it's an evolutionary concept, right?
So even in a prototype, it should be perfect. That is the difficult.
Yeah, Chiaki and I sit on a METI project for design and industry competitiveness, and we are discussing the issues to be overcome as follows. Number one, at manufacturers, we have engineers, business and finance people, and designers, and you know, engineers and business and finance people have much stronger influence compared with designers. And those two, the former two, focus on KPIs, measurable KPIs. So their argument within the organization is usually stronger than what designers say. And because of the power balance, designers join the product development process later as a kind of downstream activity, while product planners and engineers dominate the upstream activities. So again, the designers have a less voice in the final product. And that's partly because of the education system of this country. We have engineering schools, liberal arts schools, and art schools. Designers are largely from art schools. So those three are different silos, and designers lack their training on computer science or data analytics, which is strongly needed in today's business environment.
Right. Tom, you bridge America and Japan.
Yes.
Talk to me a little bit about the differences.
Sure. As I said, you know, there's all that creativity here in Japan. It's sometimes the courage to speak up. And sometimes it helps to establish your purpose early on. When we start a project with client teams, a very common thing we do is we do what we call hopes and fears. So every person on the project takes 2 Post-it notes, and on one they write, what is their greatest hope for this project? And then what is their greatest fear, right? And it can be very, very helpful. I was doing this recently with a Japanese tech company in the, I'd say, largely, let's say, telecommunications space. And we were working on a product related to the elderly, right? And the product's not announced, or I actually don't know where it stands right now, so I won't tell you the company or the product yet, but I can tell you how hopes and fears went. Everybody writes theirs down, and we write them down in advance because you don't want anyone to think you copied their idea, right? So you've all written your hopes and fears, and it's best to be one of the first few people, because otherwise, yours will be the same, right? So I look around and nobody wants to start, so I start. And I go up and I said, here's my hope. My hope is that you come up with an idea, a product or a service so great that my 90-year-old mother really, really wants to use your product, right? Of course, we're designing first for the Japanese market, but a good product like that will go global, right? So that's my hope. And then I've done this hope and fear things like 500 times, and I've never seen this happen. Every single people, there are probably 8 people, between the IDEO people and our client team, there are probably 8 people there, they all wrote the same thing. I mean, for them, it was their grandmother, of course. They don't have a 90-year-old mother like I do, right? They all said the same thing. They all had the same hope for the project. They come from a technology-based company, but they agreed on the first day of the project, they were making something for their grandmother. I said, like, you've not only established your hopes, you've established your mission for the whole project. Every time you come to a design decision on this project, a business decision on this project, ask yourself, would my grandma like this? Would this help my grandmother, or would she find it confusing? Would she find it bad, right? And so they set off in a new direction. And so sometimes it takes just the slightest little nudge to get people out of their normal patterns, right? And you can start them down the path. And by the way, no one in that room, no one on the client team was called a designer, right? Our design thinking involves a lot of empathy, it involves a lot of anthropology, right? We hire degreed anthropologists, but it's not necessary to have the degree to practice that craft at IDEO. And I met a very famous anthropologist from Canada, a guy named Grant McCracken, several years ago, and he said, you know, this anthropology stuff is way too important to be left to the anthropologist, right? And so it is with design thinking. This is not an idea for designers. I mean, yes, designers practice it, but the idea of design thinking is that everyone can use it. Sometimes they need to be shown the way a little bit, but everybody can use this, and they do. I get emails every day from readers of my book, Indian housewife, telling me how she used design thinking to change her life. 14-year-old Icelandic boy, a story that made my wife cry, right? This is, everybody can do this. It is the tools of a designer, but it's available to everyone.
So think freely. Now, as of tomorrow, when we're all back in the salt mine of our respective businesses, you know, you talked about, you know, in the traditional business metrics, right? You've got KPIs, you've got your goals. Now, when you do these projects, right, I mean, you must have some yardstick, some measurements by which you hold yourself accountable, right? So how does that work? Tell me a little bit about that. We didn't practice that question.
Well, what we sometimes measure is the number of new ideas, number of people who speak up at those sessions, and a number of likes each idea gets from other members,
Right.
something like that.
Right.
But all subjective in a way,
Right, right,
and qualitative in many cases.
right,
And that is fine.
right. Saito-san, from the designer's perspective, you know, when you get pulled into one of these projects, right, what is your aha moment? What gets you going? You're just happy to be sitting at the table.
You know, I think it's the good moment. I mean, for me, the best moment is that I see the future, like backcast I mentioned in the presentation. Like, you know, it's easy to just slow some idea in the future. Like everybody starts swarming each other. Like some are facing the low problem, some are facing a financial problem, whatever. But my wow moment is like the moment which we accomplish all those, like going through rough load to make it everything available. And then I think what Tom was mentioning, like the design for everyone, is I think really strong. That like, well, that's why I think the designer can actually go in like one industry to another, because it's a common language to different ages or different cultures, or you know, the different nations, different background, or whatever, right? So, sorry, I mean that is what my like the best wow moment.
No, that's great. I mean, you know, just one other question before we go to Q&A. You know, empathy, experiment, storytelling, and then confidence, right? And, you know, I've been stuck in Japan for a generation. Confidence is not something that springs to mind, right? In terms of when you are in normal business interactions here. What can you do? I mean, you're all enlightened, right? But what can you do to empower, you know, the average Japanese executive? You know, where does that energy, where does that have to come from? Or is that something that, you know, our minister in residence here can actually legislate?
Right. Well, I think we have, as a designer or as an artist, I mean, we have the power to think from a totally different perspective, from the like financial point of view, from long point of view, or realizing point of view, or even like we don't need the KPIs, right? Well, there was a big discussion about in the UK that with the conference I attend, like some people say the artists have to have the KPI, but I'm so against it. Like we shouldn't have a KPI. Well, of course, I'm in design. The commercial-based design have to have a KPI, but so we don't really have actually really strong connection or like a direct common language between the two different layers, like the governors or you know the businessman, like from what we're the designer from a street level. I think we have to work together. I mean, well, and then my big kind of message is that like please utilize or please just work with the designer, and I think they have a totally different point of view. So it's bring the totally different ideas.
Hayashi-san, what do you think? What's the catalyst? I mean, you are the catalyst, but
Business executives often ask KPIs on project, but at the same time, I often see many big decisions are made without KPIs. So when people ask KPI on a project, that means they are not confident in that project. Because Saito-san showed the computer graphics of Shibuya crossing. Right. They love it, and they did it with a lot of budget. Right. But did you ask KPI on that project?
No.
Right? So that is the power of design, I think. And once we can show the vision or future with higher resolution, that mostly done by designer, but not only designer, but not text or PowerPoint presentation. We will spend long time to have shared vision. But once we visualize the scene, once people love it, no KPIs. And then we can make KPIs after maybe some time spent. Okay, let's show this result using this KPI. I'm answering to your question.
you are giving the perfect answer. Love as the KPI. This is very good. No, perfect. Tom, any comments?
Sure. I think it gets back to what I said before about purpose. You know, it's really what you said, which is if you get people to fall in love with an idea or to see their future in the idea. You know, we sometimes we get in this situation where we love our idea and other people don't yet. Right? And what we feel you should do in that situation is paint a picture of the future with your idea in it, right? So that make your idea come to life in some way, maybe a physical prototype, maybe a video, maybe whatever quick technique you can to bring it to life, and then other people around you see it maybe with the same brilliance that you see it, and then sometimes they go along, and sometimes it transcends the mundane, you know, specifications that they've had in mind when they come to us.
KPIs or scientific management is really good at eliminating failures in advance, but not good at creating a future, creating something exciting. So you really have to rely on your own intuition.
I think one thing that's also very important is that, you know, Japan is the master of Kaizen, incremental improvement. Japan does better than Germany, and oops, I'm from Germany. Japan is the world champion of. But, you know, and I'm sure in all of our discussions today, there was this point, if Japan could only do this step jump, if Japan could only do this quantum jump. And that's exactly where design thinking comes in. Design thinking does nothing for Kaizen. If you need to build a better pencil in faster time, meeting a stricter KPI, you do not need Saito-san, right? But if you want to invent or conceptualize a new device for writing, that's where Saito-san comes in. Right? If I summarize this correctly. Sorry, I 5 minutes ago didn't know what design thinking was. So with this, you know, we are sort of giddy on the time here. We do want to open the floor for some questions. So please, you know, one questions we thought was worthwhile in your organization, in what you are doing, the going concern that you are running or that you are managing, right? What are some of the step things that you would like to achieve, but right now you're sort of stuck in your little silo managements? Any sort of concrete, you know, questions that you have, and then, you know, we can get some free advice, some free answers for that. I'm going to ask the minister. Excellent. Okay, we're starting big. Okay, ごめん、ちょっとマイクは。はい。
Since your eyes are pointing me, Let me ask a very simple question. We normally says right brain and left brain, and left brain controls more KPI, right? And right brain is more for design thinking. Is that true? That's my question.
Anybody?
Well, I think back in the day, yes. But right now, I think we have to use both brains, like back and forth. I think that becomes like, the great skill to think about the KPI point of view and then also the design point of view.
Sure, I was going to say a similar thing, that the easy problems of, that can be done with one side of the brain have mostly already been done, right? It's the holistic thinking. It's the combination of people from different parts of the company. It's your engineers sitting down and really respecting the designers and the marketers and, and people from different disciplines. And so in the blend of the different disciplines in your company, that's where the magic happens. That's where you come up with an idea that other people working in their silos have not come up with.
So I think, please, just quickly, who are you? And just very quick.
Anton Roof from ADC Forum in Australia. I have a question, just want to keep it on the abstract and theoretical for the minute. All great ideas and philosophies and theories have limits. You've been working with design thinking for a long time, you invented it. What are the limits of design thinking?
There was a wonderful designer in the 1950s or something. It was Charles Eames, and they asked him, what is the limits of design? This was before the word design thinking came out, and he said, what are the limits of problem, right? And so I don't think, it's not that there's a limit, it's that there will be things added to. So design thinking is added on to our analytic approaches to problem solving. And the analytic part isn't going to go away. This is just kind of another layer. And so I imagine that there'll be another layer added on in the future. And so for example, we're blending design research with behavioral economics because we think that behavioral economics has a big role here. And now we're blending in data science with it. And so it will blend with new other disciplines, but I don't really see it going away. It has been adopted pretty widely around the world.
Tuck, any comment? Nothing to add, okay. It's an evolution, please.
Hi. Hi, Tom. We talked earlier. Carl Burrow. I teach design thinking and business model innovation at Kelley University as an adjunct professor. I've been doing design thinking for about 10 years now, 10, 11 years, and did a lot of the seminars at Stanford D School. My question is that a lot of the work that I've been doing for the past 10 years in corporate innovation for design thinking, I'm starting to see a blend, a convergence between R&D and product development and sales and marketing, okay? My question to you, Tom, and also to you, Umezawa-san, what do you see that the future is going in Japan in corporate innovation for design thinking and product development? Because basically in Japan, R&D, research and development, and product development have been operating in silos. And we've always had the notion, the way that I teach my clients in my classes, that sales and marketing need to be better designers and actually to understand the customer perspective. And I would like you to share some thoughts on that and where do you see that's going in the future?
Great.
Sure. Yeah, I'll tell you one thing I see is the emergence of entrepreneurship as a significant component of the future of Japan. Right, I spoke at Slush Asia the first year it came, and it's really, I recommend it. It's this high energy young group who's really excited about the companies that they're starting. And one of the things I said to them is, look, me talking about entrepreneurship, let me make sure you understand I am not dissing is the word I use, not disrespecting your parents' generation. What your parents and your grandparents did was amazing. With the Japan Inc. and built from like a tremendous recovery, unprecedented in the history of economics in the world, right? But now's your time. And I believe that in the future of Japan, it's not like entrepreneurship and startups are going to replace the big successful companies you have, but it's just it's gonna have a richer mix of entrepreneurship. And so that's certainly one of the trends I see it. You know, you hang around Shibuya for more than about 5 minutes, you know, it's really obvious that this is happening.
Yeah, I fully agree with his comment about that point. And another important aspect, at Japanese manufacturers, concurrent product development and engineering was fairly quick to be adopted in the 80s and 90s. And the American companies mimicked later. So I think we have a good track record of doing something concurrent rather than in a kind of serial process. And with the notion of design thinking prevailing, I'm pretty optimistic about doing something similar again, meaning that integrating designers as well as marketers in the upper work stream of the company's value chain sooner or later. And we'll start to see many successes along the way.
Many successes along the way. Mizuno-san.
This is Mizuno from GPIF. Thank you very much for very interesting presentation and the conversation. I think it makes a lot of sense for the conventional, traditional business people who struggle to think out of box, trying to learn from a designer, which is much more creative. But the concern is, I really don't know how to distinguish a good designer from bad designer. Because if we learn from design, we want to learn from good ones. So can you just share, tell us that how to distinguish the good ones?
Hayashi-san. You will have to answer this. We have to leave this.
Loftwork has 10,000 creators.
10,000 nani?
Creators?
10,000 creators.
Biggest creator network in Japan.
Wow. Did you know that? 10,000 creators. How many of you are a member here? Nobody. God, you're a bored, dull crowd. Okay, Dozo. What's a good design?
Capture the very moment of people are moved, I think. Good designer can capture that with any means. That's what I think. And also, can I add one comment to the minister's question? Left brain, right brain. I think the order is very important. Right brain first, left brain comes later. In Kawakita-jiro's book, it's really a shared vision with design thinking, but it's Japanese version of design thinking to me. And he says, feel something as a human being, and then consider why. So put more value on feeling.
Right.
So, and designer can capture that moment. Is a good designer. That's what I think.
It's like one of the governors of the Bank of England said in the 1930s, about economists. He said, we do, and you economists explain to us why we did it. It's the same with designers.
Well, I think I have another version of the answer to Mizuno-san's questions. A good designer will engage you in the dialogue to identify what is really important. And probably the bad designer will try to come up with his own or her own idea and push it to you.
Mr. Designer.
Yeah, well, I think my really practical answer is just try it once, someone, and then you'll find, you'll find your own path, which is a good designer or a bad designer. Well, I'm really exploring right now ants and grasshopper, point of view. Ants is like, for me, the 20th century is the way to work, but the grasshopper is like the way to work is like more kind of 21st century and maybe afterwards. So, well, even like at the glance, maybe like at the first meeting, where you think that the designer is just too funky, but I think he might be right. So my advice is just make it fail. And go one fail to another, and you have a better.
And also, Mizuno-san, I want to ask, what is a good partner for you? I mean, good designer is a partner for the business, and good partner is different for each individual, I think. So there is no perfect design Do you think? I'm not sure, but there's no perfect designer for everyone. But
There's a
maybe
perfect designer for a moment.
for no, or for me, for now. I don't know, but try.
I mean, again, what have we talked about today? All these different sessions, a very lively discussion. I think everybody agrees, everybody knows, business as usual is not an option. There are so many changes, whether they're political, whether they're with AI, wherever they are coming from, right? So if business as usual is not an option, design thinking, is one of the tools, right? And it's a very, very practical tool that has been developed, where there is a history that can actually allow you to open up new frontiers. Whether you will implement it or not, who knows? Some companies are just happy to be a bunch of accountants. Sorry, okay, no offense to the accountants. Anyway, so that's sort of what we wanted to say. Thank you very, very much for your attention, and thank you very much for this wonderful panel. Thank you.